Okay, go ahead and spell or say your name and then spell it.
My name is Genevieve Day, and it's spelled Genevieve. Last name is Day, D-A-Y.
Okay, and then can you talk a little bit about how you found the farm to fiber movement and then decided to create the shop?
So I had done a trunk show with a farm fiber farmer at my full service yarn and fabric shop that I had in Jamaica Plain called JP Knit and Stitch. So I had done a trunk show, and her name was Kelly, and she had a farm in Maine called Romney Ridge Farm. And I forget how we kind of connected, but she came down to my shop, and that was the first time I'd seen. She made yarn out of her specifically mostly Romney flock of sheep, and so we did a trunk show, and so she was talking a little bit about other farmers that she knew, and talking a little bit about the different qualities of the yarn and the fiber from the different sheep. And so I was sort of intrigued, and then that December I came here, and it had just recently opened in the summer. I came to the Boston Public Market to buy food for a dinner I was giving for some friends, and I walked around the market, and I kind of started to see a few non-food vendors, and I thought, you know what, this market needs is farm fiber. And so it was just an idea that I had that like popped into my mind, and I didn't really think much of it, but the days went on, and it kept coming to me, and I decided to do just a little bit of research to see whether it was even possible to source enough good quality farm fiber for a stall. I also happened to know somebody that was connected to the administration of the market, and I had emailed him and was very thought great things about the market, and made a throwaway comment about the farm fiber. And he ended up forwarding that to the CEO of the market at the time. And apparently I learned later they really had always wanted to have some kind of farm fiber in the market. They didn't know that much about it, and it never quite panned out, and they were actually talking to some of their farmers to see whether they had any small amounts of wool that they could bring in. Anyway, so they had that idea from the beginning as well. So I visited a few regional sheep and wool festivals, and the first one I went to was in New Hampshire, and I ended up meeting and just really falling in love with the whole farm fiber movement, and just met a lot of great farmers and saw a lot of different wools, and I started to understand sort of diversity within the single heritage sheep breed yarn kind of movement. So anywhere from merino sheep to Cormo sheep to Shetland sheep to CBM Rommeldale, they all have very distinct characteristics and create very different yarns. And it also seemed to tap into the New England landscape in an interesting way, and the long history of textile production, small mill and fiber processing that goes on throughout New England even now. And so I started to meet with farmers and started to ask them. Mostly they just tended their flocks and then sold their wools at regional sheep and wool festivals, or maybe one or two like farmers markets locally. None of them really had ever had a pipeline into any shops, maybe one local yarn shop or something like that. This was very different, and some of them were very skeptical, I would say. But I talked to, I know. And I did talk to a few that were really early adopters of the idea. One being a dear friend who's become a good friend of ours is Tammy from Wing and a Prayer Farm in Vermont. She produces a very high quality, wonderful farm yarn. Sells them all over the place, and she was sort of an early supporter. But we did discover that going to all these sheep and wool festivals, that there was enough high quality farm yarn that they were willing to sell to me at a wholesale price that I could then sell into a stall. So I kind of put together a proposal and submitted it to the market in the spring of 2016. And then I didn't hear from them for months and went away in the summer. And then, at the end of the summer, I got an email saying, your application has been accepted. Can you open in a week? I was like, no, I can't. And so what I ended up doing was committing to a vertical selling wall here at the market, which is different from our current stall, which we've built out, a more permanent stall, but it was a vertical selling wall. And I I just, in about 6 weeks, I kind of pulled together enough wool, doing a major road trip through New England, picking them up all over the place, and setting up, and we opened the day after Thanksgiving of 2016, and so we just opened and sort of, let's see what happens, and it's been a really great experience ever since. So we were open from on the vertical selling wall through, that was 2016, and then 2017 June, Kate came in as my partner. So it's the two of us, Kate Riolas and myself, and we're partners and so with Kate that summer we did a lot of planning and kind of strategic thinking and a lot of other things. But we decided to commit to a permanent stall for September of 2017. So we committed to that, we built it out, and we opened September of 2017. And then we had a pretty successful fall, and then we decided to do a Boston Farm and Fiber Festival, which is not something anyone has ever really seen in downtown Boston. So we brought 16 plus farm fiber vendors all the way into downtown Boston in February of 2018, and had a really successful farm fiber day in the market. And the next one is February 10th, 2019, second annual. And that's kind of how it all started.
Cool. And then second and last question for now. Can you talk about the farm to fiber industry as it pertains to like New England and then nationally? And do you think it's been growing? Is it stagnant? Where do you think it's going in the future?
So I think it's growing. It's definitely growing in visibility, and I definitely think there's a kind of a hunger for that connection to the land, especially for a certain subset of crafters that are very aware. It is definitely growing on a national level because there are medium-sized yarn brands that are sourcing all of their wool locally, but locally meaning in the U.S. So big wool farms, sheep farms out in Montana, sheep farms in California that are producing large quantities of wool for the American market. Some of that wool is actually processed in New England because we have such a long-term and historic, history with processing wool. So we know a lot about it in this part of the world. So some of that wool comes back east to be processed. It's also a movement that's happening in, there's great yarn culture in Great Britain, so in Ireland, the Shetland Islands, England. There's a huge growth in thinking about regional farming systems and sheep and different, breeds of sheep there, and so that's a very vibrant movement that's only growing. In France, same. There's some movement towards, we follow a few French knitting designers that are interested. There's definitely one knitting yarn company that's French-based that's thinking about regional and local wools. I definitely think it's only growing. We're kind of doing a very unique thing that I think we can do because New England has such a vibrant farming, small family farming culture, and it's growing. So we partner with anywhere from older, very established farms to young people that are, going out there and creating their own fiber farms and producing wool and other things on their farms. So I only see it as growing. It's been a really fun thing for us to be involved in.